The railroad built America. But the men who ran those early trains paid a terrible price. Before safety regulations, before automatic brakes, before anyone cared about worker lives, there were jobs so deadly that survival felt like luck. Here are 15 dangerous old railroad jobs that no longer exist. Number 15. Callboy. Before telephones reached working-class neighborhoods, railroads needed human alarm clocks. Callboys, often teenagers as young as 12, roamed city streets at all hours, summoning train crews to duty. The job sounds simple until you consider what it actually meant. These boys walked alone through the roughest districts at 3 in the morning, often carrying cash payments for the men they woke. Muggings became routine. One Chicago callboy reported being attacked 17 times in a single year. The railroad's response was to hire another callboy when one disappeared. But physical danger was only part of the hazard. Callboys worked around the clock with no set schedule. They slept in railyard shacks between calls, eating whatever the cook car provided. Sleep deprivation was constant. Many developed lifelong health problems from years of irregular hours during crucial developmental years. The position existed because railroads refused to install telephones in workers' homes. That would cost money. A callboy cost almost nothing. By the 1920s, most railroads finally equipped crew dispatch offices with telephone directories. The callboy vanished almost overnight. Not because railroads cared about child welfare. They just found a cheaper alternative. The few surviving callboys became dispatchers. Number 14. Car knocker. The name alone tells you how rough this job was. Car knockers inspected freight cars by literally hitting them with hammers, listening for cracks in wheels and frames. A skilled car knocker could identify a fractured axle by sound alone. A distracted one ended up under the next train. These inspectors worked in busy yards where cars rolled constantly. Their job required crawling beneath loaded freight cars to check brake rigging and running gear. The cars weren't secured, and they could start moving at any moment if a switchman coupled another car to the string, or if a hump yard sent cars rolling downhill. Death came quickly, and without warning. One Pennsylvania Railroad report from 1897 noted that car knockers suffered casualty rates triple those of other yard workers. The problem was time pressure. Yards processed hundreds of cars daily. Inspectors had minutes to examine each one. Rushed inspections meant missed defects, and missed defects meant derailments down the line. But slow inspections meant trains leaving late, and late trains cost money. Management always chose speed over safety. The job title itself came from the hammering technique. Modern ultrasonic testing equipment eventually replaced human ears. Car knockers became car inspectors with electronic tools instead of sledgehammers. Number 13. Track walker. Every mile of railroad track needed daily inspection. Before motorized speeders and track geometry cars, that meant one man walking alone through the wilderness, checking every rail joint, every spike, every tie. Track walkers covered up to 20 miles per shift in all weather, carrying only a lantern and basic tools. The isolation was absolute. Many track walkers spent entire careers without seeing another human during work hours. When something went wrong, there was no one to help. Snake bites, falls into ravines, attacks by wild animals, exposure during sudden storms. The track walker vanished. Some were found weeks later. Others never were. Then the railroad hired a replacement. But the real danger came from the trains themselves. Track walkers worked on active lines. They had to time their inspections between scheduled trains, stepping aside at the last moment. Fog, curves, and noise from nearby trains masked approaching locomotives. A moment of inattention meant death. One Southern Pacific memo from 1889 noted that track walkers ranked among the company's highest fatality rates. The position required excellent hearing and constant vigilance. Deaf track walkers were common, not because hearing impairment helped. Years of close exposure to passing locomotives destroyed their hearing, which made the job even more dangerous. Railroads ran on information as much as steam. Telegraph lines ran alongside every track, carrying train orders that prevented collisions. When those lines went down, someone had to fix them immediately. Telegraph linemen climbed 40-foot poles in blizzards, ice storms, and lightning to restore communication before two trains occupied the same track. The climbing itself killed many. Wooden poles rotted from the inside, appearing sound until a lineman's weight snapped them in half. The fall rarely killed instantly. Instead, workers lay with broken backs beside remote tracks, waiting for help that might never come. Ice storms created particular horror. Lines would sag under frozen weight, then snap violently when linemen tried to repair them. The whipping wire could decapitate a man at close range. Lightning strikes killed linemen outright. Working atop the highest point in flat prairie country during summer storms was essentially suicide. Yet dispatchers demanded immediate repairs regardless of weather. A dead telegraph line might cause a head-on collision. A dead lineman merely required paperwork. The job vanished as telephone networks replaced telegraph systems. By the 1960s, most railroads used radio communication. The last telegraph lineman simply retired. Railroad bridges had to be built fast and cheap. That philosophy killed bridge workers by the hundreds. Timber trestles went up in weeks, often before the wood properly dried. Iron and steel bridges required workers to balance on narrow beams 100 feet above raging rivers with no safety equipment whatsoever. Falls were constant. One Union Pacific construction report casually mentions losing 4 men during a single bridge project, as though discussing misplaced tools. The bodies were rarely recovered from canyon floors or river currents. Funerals happened without corpses, but falling was only one hazard. Bridge workers handled heavy timbers and iron beams that could crush a man in an instant. Hand-forged rivets required heating until red hot, then hammering into place before they cooled. Burns, crushing injuries, and severed fingers were daily occurrences. The crews worked through injuries that would hospitalize modern workers. They had no choice. The most dangerous bridges crossed active rail lines. Construction happened between trains, with workers scrambling clear when locomotives approached. Timing errors proved fatal regularly. One Pennsylvania Railroad bridge project recorded 9 deaths during construction, 7 from falls and 2 from being struck by trains. Number 10. Hostler. The hostler moved locomotives around roundhouses and service facilities. It sounded like the safest job in railroading. After all, hostlers just repositioned engines at slow speeds within yard limits. What could go wrong? Everything, apparently. Roundhouses concentrated every danger railroading offered into confined spaces. Hostlers worked around turntables that could rotate unexpectedly. They squeezed between locomotives separated by inches. They operated engines while mechanics worked underneath, trusting hand signals in noisy, smoke-filled buildings. Boiler explosions killed hostlers regularly. When a locomotive's boiler failed in the roundhouse, the confined space turned the explosion into a catastrophe. A 1912 explosion in San Antonio killed 26 men, most of them hostlers and shop workers caught in the blast radius. The boiler traveled more than 1,000 feet. Steam and boiling water created another constant threat. Roundhouse locomotives sat with boilers pressurized, ready for service. Leaking valves scalded workers without warning. Some burns proved fatal weeks later from infection. The job disappeared when diesel locomotives replaced steam. Modern hostlers still exist, but they work with machines that don't explode, and they do not fill enclosed spaces with suffocating smoke. Number 9. Flagmen. When a train stopped unexpectedly, someone had to walk back along the track with flags and flares to warn approaching trains. That someone was the rear brakeman, serving double duty as flagman. The job meant walking alone into darkness, often in terrible weather, knowing that a second train might appear at any moment. Flagmen positioned themselves far enough behind the stopped train to give approaching engineers time to brake. In practice, this meant standing exposed on open track for hours. Cold killed flagmen through hypothermia. Heat killed them through exhaustion. Trains killed them when they wandered onto adjacent tracks, without realizing another train approached from the opposite direction. The isolation was brutal. Flagmen stood alone in wilderness with only a kerosene lantern. They listened for trains they couldn't see, watched for headlights that might arrive too fast for the engineer to stop. The job demanded perfect judgment under impossible conditions. Walk too far back and you might not hear the conductor's recall signal. Position too close and the approaching train couldn't stop in time. Every decision balanced your life against everyone on both trains. Automatic block signals eventually replaced human flagmen. The lonely vigil ended. Steam locomotive boilers accumulated scale and sediment that reduced efficiency and caused dangerous hotspots. Removing this buildup required men to climb inside the boiler itself. Boiler washers crawled into metal containers barely large enough to hold a human body, scraping mineral deposits in near total darkness while scalding water dripped from surfaces that might still hold residual heat. The confined space could kill in many ways. Poor ventilation allowed toxic gases to build up. Residual steam could flash burn exposed skin. Awkward positions left men wedged in narrow passages, unable to free themselves. Rescue attempts sometimes killed both the trapped worker and his would-be rescuer. Chemical cleaning agents added another level of horror. Railroads used caustic compounds to dissolve scale faster. These substances burned skin on contact and caused permanent lung damage when inhaled. Boiler washers rarely lived to old age. Those who survived developed chronic respiratory diseases that shortened their lives by decades. Heat exhaustion was constant. Even after locomotives sat cold for days, boiler interiors retained enough warmth to cause heat stroke. Modern steam locomotives use chemical water treatment to prevent scale buildup. The job ceased to exist when preventing the problem cost less than paying men to fix it. Number 7. Gandhi Dancer. The name sounds almost cheerful. It wasn't. The name hid just how dangerous it was. Gandhi dancers were section hands who maintained railroad tracks using nothing but hand tools and coordinated muscle power. They swung sledgehammers to drive spikes. They lifted rail segments weighing hundreds of pounds. They tamped ballast until their arms went numb. The choreographed movements that gave them their name, synchronized pulls on lining bars to shift track into alignment, required perfect timing. One man out of rhythm meant injuries for everyone. The tools themselves became weapons. Spike mauls weighing 10 pounds were swung overhead for hours. Miss the spike, and you might crush a co-worker's foot or your own skull. The repetitive motion caused permanent damage to shoulders, backs, and hands. Many Gandhi dancers became deaf from years of hammering beside passing trains. But the real killer was the working environment. Section gangs labored on active track. Trains approached while men worked. The foreman watched for locomotives while workers kept their heads down. One failed warning, and a train could scatter bodies across the right-of-way. Heat stroke claimed workers in summer. Frostbite took fingers in winter. The job attracted immigrants and African Americans because no one else would do it. Mechanized track equipment eliminated the position by the 1960s. Number 6. Switchmen. The American Switchmen's magazine once noted that their occupation was the most dangerous of any branch of railroading. They weren't exaggerating. Switchmen worked in busy yards, throwing switches and coupling cars while locomotives shunted freight in every direction. The least misstep could cost a man his life. In 1901, more than 2/3 of the Switchmen's union benefit claims were for work accidents. Yards never stopped moving. Switchmen dodged between rolling cars, trusting their judgment of speed and distance. Misjudge by a few feet, and you ended up crushed between freight cars or under the wheels. The work happened in all weather, day and night, on surfaces slick with oil and ice. Switchmen developed an instinct for survival, or they died. There was no middle ground. The flying switch was particularly deadly. This maneuver required uncoupling cars while the train moved, then throwing the switch at precisely the right moment. Split-second timing determined whether the operation succeeded or the switchman died beneath rolling wheels. Widows of switchmen filled courtrooms with liability lawsuits. Railroad case law from this era reads like a catalogue of horrible deaths. Modern operations still require switchmen, but automatic couplers and radio communication have reduced the carnage. Railroad tunnels required boring through mountains using explosives and manual labor. The men who did this work died in numbers that shocked even an era accustomed to industrial slaughter. Cave-ins buried crews alive. Premature explosions scattered men across rock faces. But the most insidious killer was invisible. Silicosis, caused by inhaling rock dust, destroyed lungs slowly and irreversibly. The Hawks Nest Tunnel disaster in West Virginia became America's worst industrial catastrophe. Between 1930 and 1932, workers bored through nearly pure silica rock without masks or ventilation. At least 764 men died, most of them African-American migrants seeking work during the Depression. Company doctors called it tunnelitis and blamed the workers. Congressional hearings revealed that supervisors wore masks while inspecting the tunnel, but provided none for the men drilling. Tunnel workers who survived immediate dangers often died within months from acute silicosis. Their lungs filled with scar tissue until breathing became impossible. The company buried African-American victims in unmarked mass graves. Families never learned what happened. Modern tunnel boring machines and strict ventilation requirements eliminated most hazards. The tunnel worker of the steam era ceased to exist. Number 4. Locomotive firemen. The firemen shoveled coal into the locomotive's firebox, maintaining the fire that generated steam for propulsion. It sounds straightforward. It was actually one of the deadliest jobs on the railroad. Firemen worked on a swaying platform beside an open furnace that exceeded 2,000 degrees. They shoveled continuously for hours, feeding engines that consumed tons of coal per trip. A fireman on a heavy freight might shovel 16 tons during a single run. The heat was relentless. Summer cab temperatures exceeded 140 degrees. Men collapsed from exhaustion and heat stroke regularly. Some fell into their own fires. But boiler explosions remained the greatest fear. When a crown sheet failed or water dropped too low, the resulting explosion could launch a locomotive hundreds of feet. Firemen died instantly or survived with burns covering most of their bodies. The fatality rate for railroad workers in the 1890s reached 9 per thousand annually, higher than hard rock miners. Firemen accounted for a disproportionate share. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen began as a mutual benefit society, specifically because so many members died that families needed organized support. Diesel locomotives eliminated the fireman position entirely. The endless shoveling stopped. Building railroads through mountains required explosives, lots of explosives. The men who handled dynamite, nitroglycerin, and black powder worked under conditions that guaranteed regular fatalities. Early explosives were chemically unstable. Nitroglycerin could detonate from a slight jar or a temperature change. Dynamite sometimes sweated nitroglycerin in warm weather, becoming increasingly sensitive. Workers carried these materials over rough terrain, up scaffolding, and into confined spaces, where a single mistake meant instant death. Chinese workers on the Central Pacific faced particular horrors. They were lowered in baskets over cliff faces to drill holes and place charges. When a fuse burned faster than expected, the man in the basket had nowhere to go. Bodies were rarely recovered from canyon floors. Premature detonations killed handlers without warning. A spark, a dropped crate, or friction from improper storage could set off an explosion. The blast vaporized anyone nearby, and scattered fragments killed others. Railroad construction camps kept their own cemeteries, which filled steadily throughout building seasons. Modern blasting uses electronic detonators and stable explosives, with strict handling protocols. The dynamite handler of the railroad era vanished along with the most dangerous explosives. Before automatic couplers, connecting railroad cars required a man to stand between them while they rolled together. The coupler held an iron link in one hand and a heavy pin in the other. As the cars closed the gap, he guided the link into a pocket on the drawbar, then dropped the pin through a hole to secure it. All while thousands of pounds of steel closed around him. The margin for error was zero. Hesitate too long and the cars crushed you. Move too quickly and the link missed its target. Experienced couplers developed missing fingers as badges of their trade. Mangled hands were so common that railroads accepted them as part of the job. Complete crushing deaths happened weekly across the American rail network. This was dangerous work. One Interstate Commerce Commission report noted that in 1893, one railroad worker died every other day from coupling accidents alone. The link and pin system was so deadly that Congress finally intervened. The Safety Appliance Act of 1893 mandated automatic couplers that connected without anyone standing between cars. Railroads complained bitterly about costs while workers continued dying. The automatic coupler eliminated the link and pin man. The missing fingers became historical curiosities. The unmarked graves remained. Number 1. Roof-running brakemen. And here it is, the deadliest job in American railroad history. Before George Westinghouse invented the AIR brake, stopping a freight train required men to run across the tops of moving cars, spinning brake wheels by hand, one car at a time. The brakemen worked on catwalks barely 18 inches wide, often covered with ice or coal dust. When the engineer whistled for brakes, the brakeman started running. He leaped between cars, spinning each wheel tight before moving to the next. A stuck wheel could throw him off balance. A sudden jolt could pitch him between the cars. Low bridges and tunnel portals decapitated men who failed to duck in time. Injury statistics from the 1880s are staggering. 1 in every 12 trainmen was injured annually. 1 in every 117 died on the job. The brakemen accounted for the majority of those casualties. Widows filled entire sections of railroad towns. The Safety Appliance Act of 1893 mandated air brakes along with automatic couplers. Suddenly, the engineer could stop the entire train from the cab. The roof-running brakeman walked down from the cars for the last time. The most dangerous job in American railroading finally ended. And that's all, folks. These 15 jobs represent the human cost of building and running America's railroads. Men died by the thousands so trains could run on time. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe for more. Here is another video I have specially selected for you. See you next time.